plan was that you were supposed to each come up with a schema, and I'm sure there'll be a lot of similarities, and there'll probably be at least some differences in here. Notice you both have a customer table with an ID, name, address, phone number. You remember the veteran status. You've got email. You've got loan officer ID. Okay. You've got one called loan officer. You've got one called employee. All right. With an ID and a name. You've got a name and you've got a location. Okay. And you've got a thing about the loans themselves. So notice you both have a thing for loans. All right. Customer ID, type of loan, amount of loan, date loan given, interest rate, interest, amount paid, remaining balance, monthly payments, years of loan. A lot of the same stuff that you have in here. And the other group here also had a locations with a location ID, a steady state, and address. All right. That's fine. And I'll show you what I did. Some of it's similar, some of it's probably different. All right. Oops. All right, first I came up with a table called categories. No, it would be the type of loan that you were going to give. Okay, personal loan. I mean, what kinds of loans are you going to give? You have to find that out. Okay, I mean, some people walk in there and they want to get a loan. They may or may not even have to give a reason. You know, if you've got a lot to put up as collateral, you probably could. And so I just had to create the database and stuff here. So I had a category ID and a category description, and that's all that it was going to be. Now, notice in here, you didn't have to say this, but of course, all of your primary keys can't be null. The category description, I probably should have made that not null also. All right? At least in hindsight, I probably should have put a not in front of that. All right. Then I had a customers table, and what I did, for lack of better words, was I just blocked everything that you had on your last test. That's what I took it from. Okay? And since we said that virtually every field was required, now notice I didn't make this one required. Not everybody still has an email, all right? But I figured everybody has either a landline phone or a mobile phone. So I thought phone made sense. The numbers could always be changed in here too. That isn't that big of a thing right now. But that's the kind of stuff that you're looking for. So like I said, you all came up with the ID, which was good for your primary keys, and I added one here too, but everything else that was in here, all right, everything that was in here was just taken right from the test. Now, for instance, the preferred method, notice I made it a 10. And if you remember, it was what? It was email, phone, and text. That's not to say later you couldn't add something else that might be bigger than that. All right, I don't know exactly what you'd add, but it's possible to do that. Then I made an employees table. The employee first name, last name, address, city, state, zip, etc., and email and telephone. You know, the question got asked, I don't know if you guys heard it, but the other group asked, could an employee take out a loan? You know, there'd be absolutely no reason that they couldn't. I didn't have a lot of linking between the tables until I came to the last ones here. All right. So I had a general loan table that had the ID and the type of loan. All right. And then the loan details that were in here. Notice I added the customer ID, the employee ID, etc. So different than yours, yeah. Each one of yours is a little bit different, but you get the idea. All right. And one of the reasons that I did this was I'm starting to look through the stuff that she sent, okay, Ms. Zika, and we're going to do that maybe starting next week already. I don't know, but the way I'd like to change the class is we're going to try to spend a couple days a week on her stuff, if indeed, you know, I'm asking, is there anyone who's really opposed to doing this, or at least attempting to look at it for her? All right. I mean, we may end up doing this project for her, and she may say, well, thanks a lot, but it's absolutely nothing that we wanted. And that's possible. All right. Or she might say, oh my God, you just saved us 3 years worth of work. All right. And I'm hoping that it'd be more that way. And I think I told you this before. I'm hoping that you guys get some ink out of it. I don't need the ink. It doesn't help my career any. I'd like to see the school get the ink. I think that would be good. It sure wouldn't hurt the program to get any. But with all of you, if we could eventually come up with something, give it to them, and have them take a picture with all of you, that gets your face and your name up there. All right? That's, that was part of my rationale behind it. So again, as we start going through this is what we have to think about. So it's not so much that I care, oh, yours is better than yours, or yours is better than yours, or mine's better. It doesn't matter. But we have to come up with something, okay? And I'm going to probably be responsible for creating a lot of the data that goes in there, okay? I mean, we could put all of us in there. We could be customers, okay? But if it's not a very big sampling rate, all right? And it's very easy in MySQL to create dummy files and throw stuff in there. Boom, just run it. I haven't done that with SQL Server, so I don't know how easy it is to do that. To basically just do the equivalent of like creating a batch file, throwing it in there, and having it, populate it with 100 records. All right? I hope that we can do that. I had a database, I've been looking for it, that a friend of mine made that has literally 6,000 records in it. And I'd love to be able to find that and use that, because then we could put in a whole bunch of stuff. All right. Now, he got nuts when he was doing it. I don't think he was drinking, but you never know. Because, like, the state for everybody, he put CF in there. And I said, what is CF? Oh, that's the state of confusion. All right. So we have 6,000 records with a state of confusion, which was just stupid. For the names of towns, he started to put them in, then he was getting bored. So he put over here, over there, everywhere. And so a lot of that stuff would have to be changed. But he's got names, and he had addresses and stuff in there. So I'd like to be able to use something like that if I can find that. And I have no idea where it is. All right. So let me give you this. I did get the figure 13.2 to work. So I'm going to give you all a copy and then go over what I did and explain to you everything I did wrong, which is quite a bit. And good, bad, indifferent, whatever, I had all those problems. I had that problem again today where I actually made a tape on this. This one that I'm going to go over right now with you, I taped myself this morning doing every step. I'm thinking, it's not going to be that bad. It'll take me maybe, I don't know, 10, 15 minutes, 41 minutes and 30 seconds. All right? But I stopped every time there was any kind of an issue. All right? And you may, or I'm going to bring it up right now, but you may or may not remember this. This is the next one, so I got to find it. I've got to look and see which one it is, because I've got no, that's 14. I've got so many copies of this now. right, this is it. Let me run it first, and I'll know right away whether or not it's the right one. So you'll get sometime today and sometime tomorrow. Ideally, by the end of the week, you'll have everything done that we've done, so through 14, okay? And you'll be able to come up and give me a flash drive or take my flash drive and copy all of your stuff. Okay, well, let me go get the cord because I didn't bring it. All right, and I'll try to explain to you, for lack of better words, the trials and tribulations that I had. So you'll notice as I change the state that the information does indeed change, okay? So I'd like to go over it. You've got the hard copy, but I'd still like to go over with you and show you places where I missed things or screwed up or whatever. Okay, so taking it from the top right here. This was that label, choose a state, etc. So what did I do wrong? Well, quite a few things. All right. First of all, and I don't know how I did it, but somehow I had this one called states, and I had the other one called state, where you reference it down there. The system didn't like that. It didn't give me an error because it's okay to name something, all right, and then reference it in a different way, the way that the code was written. It was fine. But what I want you to understand is when you're talking about a drop-down list like you see on the screen here, we mentioned this the other day. These are the things that you're going to have to set. All right. The ID and the runit, of course. The auto postback, does it make sense to everybody what auto postback is? All right. What that's saying is every single time that we change the state, we have to post it back to the server because the server is what is communicating with the database. So when we change the state, that's nice. When we change the state, what we want to have happen is we want, all right, when we change the state, that's interesting, huh? I don't know. Oh, it wasn't running on the other end. You're right. So let me start it up again. That's the problem. I've got the one for 14 running too, and it's trying to use the same port number for both, and that's what's screwing it up. All right. So again, what I want you to understand about this with that auto postback is when you click here and you change the state, doesn't matter what you change it to, all right? But the system has to know that if I go to Arkansas here and I click, the system has to go back to the database, and it's got to find in the database, it's got to scour through and find everyone that has a state of Arkansas. It looks like there aren't any. Let's make sure that it's still working, so I'll try Florida. And you can see that it is. So by saying auto postback equal true for the drop-down list for the state, I'm saying whenever I make a change to this field, all right, since this field is tied to the database, and since the database technically is on the server, post it back. I'm hoping that makes some sense to you. All right, so that's the first thing that's in there. Remember that virtually with anything that you're going to tie to a data source, and the data source will normally, the data source will be a database, normally, okay? So anything that we tie to a data source has to have a data source ID, all right? And if you're working with a drop-down list, this was right from the book, we need a data text field and a data value field. All right? Does it, I'm going to say something. I want you to look on the screen. Does this make sense? Right here. There's a data text field and there's a data value field. All right? This is the data text field right there. This is the data value field. Does that make sense? Now, normally, it's not going to be, you know, what you use for the data value field is normally going to be something like a regular ID, where it won't be nice like FL for Florida. It'll be something like, it possibly could just be an integer. All right? Or it could be like we looked at for the Halloween Superstore for the categories. It could be like cat01, cat02, etc. All right? But it's imperative that you understand when you look on the screen here what each one of the fields that are in here do. So I'm asking for a drop-down list. Is there anyone who doesn't understand any of those fields and their job, so to speak? Because the time is going to come sooner rather than later when you're going to have to create one of these on a test. All right, then we take the data source and we have to set that. So let me move this over. Okay. Hopefully you all remember this. We talked about it before, that when you are going through, so this is the data source, but when I'm going through the data source in design mode here, all right, so when I go through this and I click here and I say configure data source, okay, now when you first do it, there might not be anything here at all. You might not have any connection whatsoever. If that's the case, you'll click the new connection box. All right, that's something from this morning I forgot to produce. So. But you might have something here also. And if you do, you can use that connection string. So if I could use this connection string with anything that I'm putting in here, all right? Because this is connecting to the Halloween database. So when we do this and we click next, I know you've seen this already, but when I click next here, all right, well, it's skipping the step because we've already gone through it. But you know the step when it comes up and it's got the checkbox there? Everybody know what I'm talking about? With that checkbox, if you check that checkbox, that's what puts it into the file, the web.config file that we'll look at in just a minute. All right? But what I want you to understand from this is what we did right here. Okay? We went down to here. we specified that what we wanted was the states. We wanted both the state code and the state name. Now that's pretty self-explanatory when you look at that. You wrote queries much more complex than that last year. All right. Then next, let's just do it in this order. We'll go to order by. Yeah, we'll go to order by. We'll want to sort it by state name. And you can see what it added. That should make what's on the screen right now, that should make sense to every single one of you in here. Everybody. Finally, we want to do a where clause. Remember, it's done a little differently here because in the past, we weren't working with code. We're working with code now. So when we click where, then we want to say what we want is we want the state code to be equal to a control. What control? The one that's in DDL states. All right? So what we're doing right there, and I can't move this unfortunately, is we're linking that drop-down list to its associated value in the table. And in order to make this complete, we've got to click the Add button, which puts it in there. Now when I click OK, take a look at the query that's down on the bottom. That's the query that we want to run. All right? Yes. Pardon? It's not what's on the paper? All right. Oh, you're right. Good. Thank you for saying that. And guess what? That's where I screwed up because I did it again. Good. Because notice that when I click next, that's why when I click test query, it didn't show anything. You know why? Because when it loads, there's nothing in there for it to show. So thank you. You're right. So I'm going to go back to this. I'll go back to previous. All right. We'll go back to the where clause. All right. And I'll remove it. All right. Now when we click OK, now we're selecting the state code and the state name and ordering it by state name. Right? Thank you for pointing that out. So I'm going to click next. Notice I get data now. Because I looked this morning and yeah, I caught it this morning. Not now, but I caught it this morning. I'm like, wow. I wonder if the reason that there's nothing in there is because I've given it no criteria. So I took it out and boy, it was like everything worked. And it was like, man, I looked at everything else, but I didn't look at the obvious. So you can see what's in here. State code and state name. All right. So I click finish. What does that mean? When I click finish and I get all done, that's setting everything here up. So again, after I've done all that and I click run, it should run just as it did before. Hopefully I didn't screw anything up that was in there before. I don't think I have. All right. And drop down, choose any state you want, and as long as there is something from that state, it'll find that information. All right. Now, when we go back, and I'm going to stop the run here, and when we look at it in here, all right, because I went and redid this, so it's not nice and, like the way I make it look. But everything that's in here should make sense to you. You have written queries like this. You wrote queries like this last semester. The thing that's new is since we're working with code, we've got to have a way for our stuff in our code to connect to a database. That's what that line's doing. We're telling it to use that Halloween connection string that we set up. All right? So going, gone. Anybody have any questions on that stuff? All right, so let's look at the rest of it then. This, that's down toward the bottom, so to speak, the customer data list goes here. So notice that's our drop-down list. So that's going to have all the information. It's going to have all this information. Everybody's last name, first name, email, and state from that list. Now we do need this. Because this value right here, that value that you see in blue, That's the value that is on the drop-down list that's at the top of the screen. So if we choose Missouri, then it's going to be Missouri. All right? So going back up here, what all of this stuff in here does, again, the data list, and now we're saying, remember, the data list, rather than having what we had before, all right, the drop-down list has a data text field and a data value field. The data list has a data key field. So what's our key field? It's email. All of this stuff we went over, and it's all in the book as well. All right? So this is basically doing the setup work. And we are adding CSS. We're going to put it all into a table. Okay? This is setting up our header. So what you see right there in the blue, I think I stopped the run, didn't I? Yep. So what we're seeing right there in the blue, I showed you this the other day too, that is all of this. So everything that you see here that's now in blue, the last name, first name, email, state, that stuff right there is all being set up by this stuff. And since we're still bootstrapping, we put it in a span, which allows us to add a class that says for extra small devices and above, use 3 columns for this, 3 columns for this, 5 columns for this, and 1 column for this. All right? So that's our header information. Then we've got our item stuff that goes all the way down from for about 25 lines from 75 to 99. That stuff is giving us all of this. Does that make sense? All right. And what we have to do, since previously what we did here was we said that's 3 columns, that's 3 columns, that's 5 columns, that's 1 column. We've got to do the same thing here. That's 3 columns, that's 3 columns, that's 5 columns, and that's 1 column. Wow, should have said 1 and it says 13. All right. Now, one last thing too, just so you know. That was what Tiffany mentioned before, where she was astute enough to point that out. It's like, hey, that's not the way it looks on yours, and she's right. I had a couple of other errors. If you look up on the screen, all right. I don't know if it was like this originally or I put it in. I don't know, but that's our label text. Would you agree with that? That's our label text. I had put in here literally the word last name also. So I had the word last name in there, then I had the last name. You understand what I'm saying? And if you want to see something ugly, the stuff was like thrown all over the place because it was, I had the word last name here. In fact, I think I had it here. And then I had over here, I had first name. And over here, I had email. And over here, I had state. Plus, if you look up on the screen, because this is stuff we all do. I did some copying, and I didn't put CSS class there. I put class equals. So it wasn't picking it up. So mine looked like an explosion. All right? And it just, there was junk all over the place that should not have been there. So after we do that and we set that up, then we have to set up again the data source. I'm hoping you're comfortable with the fact that your data source, although it doesn't have to hook onto a database, almost always it will. If we do this project and Ms. Zika says, this spreadsheet that's here, we don't want it in a database. Okay? You can hook up to it then here. So your data source does not have to be a database, but it normally is. There's less work for you to do when it is a database than what you have to do for when it's not a database. All right? The state label. right here. Yeah, I said that's a mistake. That should have been a 1. I just saw it here too. All right, that yours says 13 here for line 98 on the handout I gave you. That should just say 1. Yep, and it's missing a hyphen. That's the way it should look. Sometimes stuff works for me in spite of myself. This stuff that's right here, that we didn't talk much about in class. That's the stuff that gets set for us. Remember when we just went in and we configured the data source and we said it equal to control? Everybody with me? That's what did this. And all we're doing in here is a select. Because again, the way that the data list control is set up, although you can have it do other work, by and large, it's set up as a selection type of tool. Any questions on this? I'm not even going to say this, but this is what's going through my mind now. Okay, whether it's Friday or whether it's next week, could you create something like this? That's the question. All right. And I don't know. So that's the first one. Then the next one that we were supposed to do, I don't think I gave you hard copies of this, so I've got them too, was 14.1. I did not print out hard copies of how this is done. I will do that in a bit. But this was the actual next one that you were supposed to do, and I don't remember if I gave you this or not. I'm going to probably get in trouble from Charles for going through his paper budget. But I want to walk you through this one as well. We looked at this a little bit yesterday, but we didn't go through it. And I do have it here. And I believe it's done, and I believe it works. So let me run it for you and show you that. But first, I'm going to make sure that that one's not running. In fact, that this one now can close. I should probably save because I changed a bunch of stuff. All right. And all right, let me run it and see if indeed it works. Okay, right now we've got 3 fields in here. Everybody can see this. We've got an ID field, we've got a name field, and we've got an on-hand field. All right? When you set this up originally, the ID field that's on your screen, that's set up as read-only. They have you go in and set the name field to read-only. Right there. And the only one that you're dealing with is this one. So let's assume somebody came in and said, wow, you guys have got fog juice. We want 200 quarts. Okay? So the idea was, okay, they bought 200 quarts. So we click edit, and now instead of 500, we have 300 in here, and we update. Does that make sense? We've actually changed the database with what we've just done. Does that make sense? All right. Well, somebody else comes in and says, oh, wow, you got flying bats? Yeah, I want all of them. So you come in there and you buy all 25. Now we've got 0 left, and we update. That works, right? Not a problem. There's 0 in stock. But let's assume that when the person did it, instead of putting in 0, they accidentally put in -1. Don't ask me why they do that, but we're just going to assume they did that. And we're going to click update. Well, it doesn't work. On hand must be on the bottom. That's the validation summary. On hand must be a non-negative whole number. Okay, that's fine. So we come back and we make it 0 again. We click update. Now everything's fine. No error. All right. So somebody comes in here for the bats again. We edit it. and we're going to change the amount, all right? And we would have changed the amount. Now we don't want to buy it. We forget to put it back to 0, and we click Update. It again comes up, and it tells us that on hand is a required field. So there are two validators in here. There is a required field validator for the on-hand field. I think that was 25 originally, but I don't remember. All right, and I think that one was 500 originally. So we've got, for the on-hand, we've got two validators. A required field validator, you've already seen that. All right, and a compare validator, which compares whatever value is in there, and it compares it to 0. And it has to be greater than or equal to 0, or it's invalid. Does all that make sense? So in other words, if this field right here for on hand, if that field is left off, if we put nothing there, the required field validator is going to kick in. If we put a value in there that's less than 0, the compare validator is going to click in. All right? So I want to show you the code to do that. You don't have this code. I will run it off for you, but I want to show it to you. If nothing else, it forces you to kind of watch up here. Again, nothing new here. Nothing new here. So I'm not going to go through any of that. Why is the div underlined? I don't know. It says it's missing its closing tag. It looks like it is. It's another good reason for not printing stuff off for you until we've gone through it at least once. But what the author gives you is most of this stuff, just so you know. The author gives you almost the entire thing in this exercise. Right here in this grid view, the author gives you everything in here, everything, except for this line. So you get all of this. The author gives you that. All right? And then says, oh, you want to make sure that when you try to update, you've got some code in there. And why would you want code in there? Okay? Because what should happen is if you go in and you remove a number and it may or may not work, and then if you try it again, it's explained on here. We'll look at it in just a minute. But this right here, what you see on the screen in blue, that line of code in blue, that's the line that's going to actually send and run some C# code, this code right here. This was the same thing that we went over in the example yesterday. All right, except the only thing we're checking here is when after you've done the update. That's it. That's the only thing we're checking. All right, that's all the code that you have to write in there for this example. All right, what you're asked to do, if you look up on the screen, some of it's real easy. They say make this field read-only. Well, you're all smart enough that you can look at what's in there and you can see what I added to make it read-only. All right, I added the read-only parameter and I set it equal to true. That's the first thing that you're supposed to do. So on the handout that I just gave you, step 1 says open it up. All right, step 2 says set the read-only property of the name field to true so this field can't be changed. That's this right there. So that's step 2. Step 3, add a command field. Well, this field for the on hand, this field, all right, you've got to make some changes to it to get it to work. All right, because originally that field was not set up for you to be able to edit the values that were in it. Okay, so the field that you have to play with in here, for lack of better words, the field that you have to play with is the on-hand field. You've got 3 fields in here. You still have that up? 1, 2, 3. Our primary key field is always going to be read-only. That should make sense to everybody. We'll always have a read-only equal true. We're asked to make this field read-only. So the only field we want to allow the person to change is this one. Not only do we want to let them change it, after they change it, we want that value to be saved. Okay? If I've got existing information and I want to change that information and I want that change to be made, what kind of an operation is that? What? Yes, it's an update. To get an update, that's why in step 3 you have to add a command field that provides for updating the row. All right? Because this field right here originally was read-only. Step 4, add the event handler. Well, that's what I've shown you already, but I'll show it again. That's the code that's here. That's the event handler. So anytime they say add an event handler like they do in step 4, they're telling you you have to write some C# code. Add code that checks for database exceptions. That's right there. And displays error messages in the label at the bottom of the page. That's right there. All right. And when you do this, it's got sender, which we don't care about, but we care about E. E in there that you see that's in blue right on the end. That is the, basically, for lack of better words, that's all of the information in this case about the error. It's the event, but it's the error event. So that's why the E.exception message, that's you're writing out a database error has occurred. No, not a problem. This is going to write down what the system sends as far as what the error is in the database. All right. Then they say run it and increase the on-hand quantity for one of the products. If this works, try updating it again by clearing the quantity. And that's when this message prints. It doesn't print now on ours because I have gone in and added the required field validator and I added the compare validator. All right. But if you follow this stuff in here step by step, all right, you'll be able to walk through all of it. So turning it over, page 6 says convert the on-hand field to a template field. All right. So I had to come in here and find the on-hand field and create it, make it a template field, like you see right there. I decided to do it just by typing in code. It was previously a bound field. So this said bound field. As soon as I changed that from bound field to template field, that changed right there. And wherever the bottom one is to it, that one changed too. All right. You'll notice that when you've got bound field, it's got data field, header text, sort expression. And here we've got header text and sort expression. Would you agree we don't have data field here? If you manually change it, you're getting an error on that, and the system tells you data field isn't part of a template field. That's one of the reasons that when I change it, I do it in code. Because it allows me to change things, and when something's wrong, it shows me the message right away. So I know why something worked, all right, if I don't get an error, and why it didn't work if I do get an error. This is a big thing right here. Everybody look. This will be on your next test. Okay? Notice here it says error message, and here it says text. The text is what's going to show to the right of the actual field. Did you hear that? This error message, that goes into the validation summary. All right? So this is the error that goes in the validation summary. On hand is a required field. This is what goes into the validation summary. On hand must be a non-negative whole number. The text equal asterisk here and here, that just says what, if we have an error, what are we going to print to the right of the field? That's all. But you should all now be familiar enough that you should be able to add either a required field validator or a compare validator or a range validator or a regular expression validator. Any of those. you should all be able to add those now. And you know that when you do the old ID and run at, but you need the control to validate. If you're using a validator, you need a text and an error message. You need the display of dynamic, and if you've got an associated CSS class. All right? And that was it. So what I will do, because I just actually finished this late this morning, is I'll save this and I'll run you all off a copy of this. So I'm going to give you time now. We still have 2 hours left in class. Everyone, hopefully in that time, you can get 13.1 done, 13.2 done, and 14.1 done. All right? You've already got the text, the code there for 13.1. I gave you that the other day. 13.2 I just gave you. And 14.1 I'm going to run off right now. All right? I think there's some benefit to you keying this in because sooner or later you're going to make mistakes. Yes. Yeah. Let me print out the copies of this for everybody.